Africa is not poor because of colonization. Great stuff there.
So when I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization, I'm like, please, let's move on from that.
Does it have maybe a tiny percentage in where we are today? Maybe, and I don't know. But
it might have something to do with it. There might be a slight relationship there. Oh yeah, she does say she doesn't know. You know, maybe it's just not her area of expertise. This is really common with these like survivor's guilt, like came from a bad situation but made it and got a business and stuff, you know? Like they don't want to be seen as the victims. So they want to frame wealth and economic development as like you know, like a meritocratic, if you do the right thing, you'll come out on top kind of deal. They don't want to feel like they're contributing to this, you know, well, actually, it's this whole set of problems that aren't directly tied to input, and there are a bunch of biases because they feel it detracts from the started from the bottom, now we hear narrative that they're kind of built on.
It just happened that maybe Africa has been one of the last, you know, colonized region in the world. So in our psyche, it is there, and it acts like nothing happened before to others. But flash news, it's the history of the world. We've been capturing each other back and forth, all of that. So anyway, but the truth is...
Wait, what? Yeah, we were the continent most recently broadly colonized, but other colonizations have happened too. Okay, so I see what's happening here. So she's thinking of colonization and the effects that it has on a country's wealth and development as an excuse rather than an explanation. So she's like, yeah, okay, Africa was colonized most recently or whatever, but like that's happened to everyone, you know, as though it's like she's trying to wave away like a potential excuse that she doesn't want to have to hear, rather than it being an explanation. Well, okay, so if you acknowledge that this happens all over the place, like why would that change the effects colonization in Africa would have had on wealth and development? Doesn't really make sense. Like, that's like saying like somebody gets murdered and you're like, oh, well, that's bad. And you're like, okay, well, murder happens everywhere. Yeah? It's true.
In communist China, who, when it comes to economics, decided that we're going to do the free market, we're going to be capitalist, because that's the only way. We tried everything else. We killed hundreds of millions of people, and we have nothing to show for it.
Hundreds of millions, okay.
Right? But now that we're tired of being disrespected members of society, because guess what? That's the other thing, too. You want to be respected in this world? You're going to have to be among the prosperous ones.
Yeah, see, so this, I think this frames, like, the psychology of this argument, like, first and foremost. We all know this archetype of a person, right? They don't just exist in real life. This is like a media archetype, too, which is person who's gone through a lot, who's succeeded anyway, who has a it's a kill or die world out there attitude, who's quite callous towards the suffering associated with the efforts you have to make to succeed. This is an archetype so well known that it's a trope in like anime. It's not, yeah. That being said, obviously it's true that the development of the market sector in China has enriched the country substantially, Dengism, etc., etc. Keep in mind, this is not a one-way road, you know. Attempts at free marketification imposed by the IMF and World Bank have led to devastating economic consequences for countries in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Central and Latin America. Because usually the context in which these countries open themselves up to markets is to open themselves up to foreign markets. Singapore is unique in that Singapore, alongside some other Southeast Asian countries, adopted a protectionist strategy to develop their own internal industries. Remember when we were reading earlier about how they have like refined oil and computer parts there and stuff like that? The reason there are countries that were poor 50 years ago and now are able to do that is because they developed their internal industries until they had commodities and services that could compete with the West, at least in some small way. And that means they had something that other people were willing to seek them out for, as opposed to them just being production bitches for the West. You understand? So here's a good example of protectionist economic development being done in such a fashion. All right? Let's say you have a country that's pretty poor, they're not doing so hot, and they want to start industrializing. Okay? Now, if you're going to industrialize, you need cars. Just modern world's built on cars. Sorry, guys. I don't want it to be, but that's how it is. So how are they going to get cars? Well, they need the cars because the way the cities are laid out requires people to have autonomous transportation. But what are they going to do? Just produce their own cars? No, right? They're going to buy cars from other countries. They're going to buy cars from Germany or Japan or from America. The problem is that wealth leaves your country when you do this. If you open your markets up to Western car manufacturing, what's going to happen is people are going to buy the superior cars from outside your country. Car companies in your country will have no chance. There is no way some startup car company in your third world nation is going to be able to compete with like Toyota. There's no way. So people in your country, they buy foreign cars, you know? Foreign car manufacturers make deals with local car dealerships to have, like, you know, fancy, shiny Toyotas and Volkswagens there in your country. And where is all this wealth from your country going? Out. It's going out of your country. It's leaving your country. That wealth is going to Toyota's workers, the people who refine their resources, develop their products, their managers, their CEO, you know. Unless you implement tariffs, shut down your economy, block trade, and you force people to buy your shitty domestic cars. And hey, don't get me wrong, people don't like this, especially at first, because these local cars, they're shitty, they suck, but money stays in the country. And because money stays in the country, you know, now the people who are making these cars, those jobs are in your shitty third world country. And you're buying Toyotas, you're paying the wages of people who are working over there. You buy the shitty cars that your companies make, those workers are employed in your country. The wealth cycles. And eventually, God willing, you do this enough, you have enough wealth and enough development that the cars you produce turn out to not actually be so bad. Maybe there are local resources that your country has a lot of that you can not only just mine to sell wholesale to the West, but refine and develop. And then using those refined goods, you can sell them at a much higher premium than you ever could have, just being, you know, like just a resource bitch for the West, or letting Western companies come in and mine your resources and pay you a fraction of what they're worth after their refinement. That's the goal of protectionism. The goal of protectionism is to wall off your country's economy for long enough for them to develop to the point that they can serve a role internationally outside of just being exploited by the West. Singapore did this with great effect. Japan did this to a large extent. South Korea did this to a large extent. China's done this to some extent, but China's always been very open. Well, not always, but it's been fairly open to foreign markets since dang. Why am I forgetting the four tigers of Southeast Asia? Southeast Asia, four tigers. Why am I forgetting this? The four Asian tigers. Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea. Sorry, I'm sleepy today. Yeah. All these countries, the four Asian tigers, they to some extent or another, they did adopt protectionist policies in order to accelerate their domestic growth. Between the early 60s and 90s, they underwent rapid industrialization and maintained exceptionally high growth rates for more than 7% a year. These economies have developed into high-income economies, specializing in areas of competitive advantage. See, a competitive advantage means that they're trying to bank their economy on doing something specific that they can do better than any other country in the world. You know, maybe they can't outproduce America in all respects, but they can do one thing people need. Think of Taiwan and its microchip development, right? Taiwan is literally like 80% of microchips are made out of Taiwan. They're like the world relies on them now for that.
Even Hollywood, who tries to tell the world how to think, is being told by China what movies to make and how to tweak stories and history in order to be palatable for them.
She's not wrong here, but man, the language of that framing, perfect for conservative culture war bullshit. I can see who she plays her audience to.
You see the power that comes with being prosperous.
So yes, wealthy countries and countries with a very large population are going to have a disproportionate impact on world culture. That's true.
The Consumer Price Index has reached yet another 40-year high, and the latest GDP numbers confirm that the United States...
Wait! Do they just have an ad for buying gold? In the middle of the... Wait, just no just the middle of the video. Yeah, buy gold and silver and bury it in your front yard. Okay. That is fantastic.
One of the things that happened with India is India established the Indian Institute of Technology, which is a deadly engineering school, and a huge number of its graduates went to Silicon Valley, as you well know. And many of the successful Indian graduates of IIT started to dump money back into India and build a capitalist infrastructure there, or help build a capitalist infrastructure.
So what he's referring to right here is remittances, which are a pretty common feature of immigration. However, the visa programs for which these guys come over to Silicon Valley don't always entail like proper long-term immigration status, which means that obviously they would bring money back to India. They're not staying in America permanently. Like, of course, they're only here for employment. Like, yeah, when they're done being employed, they go back to India and they have the money from the job. So, yeah.
Congo, South Sudan, Libya, Yemen, and Venezuela, etc. What concrete steps should they take from the bottom up to get the hell out of the way?
Exactly. So
right off the bat, the framing here is going to be bad, because the idea that there's just like, here's 10 easy tips to fix the economies of 10 like desperately poor third world African nations, you know, we're obviously not going to be getting like real actionable advice here.
Two things we've been doing, because I'm a practitioner, as that's my entrepreneurial journey. I'm an entrepreneur, so I practice what I preach. But I also
Well, no. Starting businesses in America, which is what she said she did, is not the same as preaching economic reform in African countries. Those are not even remote. Like, oh my God. What? That's like saying because you're a cobbler, you can like run a marathon or something. That's like saying because you're a landscaper that you're qualified to run the United States like Department of the Interior, or like the Department of Agriculture or something. Or like because you grew a peanut plant once that you should like dictate agricultural law. Like no.
preach. I preach for free markets. And so when it comes to that...
Oh, one other thing, by the way. I do think it's interesting that she's preaching for free markets, but protectionism, which was the driving force behind a lot of Singapore's growth, is not a free market policy at all. It's actually the opposite. Protectionism is about shutting down your markets to protect local industry and prevent your industry, your population, your jobs, your wealth from being gobbled up by other much more developed countries. So yeah, the free market thing that Singapore is doing now is what they're doing after they've developed their industries. But the immediate effects of Singapore's path, if taken by another country, would mean closing themselves to the free market. Because the thing is, guys, I got to tell you, African countries, generally speaking, are pretty open to foreign investment because that's all they fucking have. I'm painting with a broad brush here, you know. Nigeria, Chad, and South Africa have wildly different economies with wild different like levels of wealth and stuff. But like there are a lot of natural resources in Africa that we've been exploiting for a very long time. And you know, after the great like end of like the age of colonization, you know, there aren't really well-developed industries in a lot of these countries. So, you know, you also tend not to have very many democracies. So they leverage those natural resources for Western companies or China with the Belt and Road Initiative to come in, develop some infrastructure, and also, you know, get the oil or diamonds or whatever for pennies on the dollar, which is technically a free market policy. It's just...
One of the hats that I wear is as the director for the African Center for Prosperity of the Atlas Network.
Okay, here we go. So this is the Atlas Network's Center for African Prosperity. Let's do a sussy review. How sussy does it feel? Let's find out. Oh, there she is. She's the director. A few years ago, my TED Talk began to raise awareness of how Africa's relative poverty is rooted in bad policies that make it costly, risky, and frustrating to create a business on the continent. Great. Let's see what the site says. The Center for African Prosperity is dedicated to restoring the economic and personal liberties of all Africans. While the colonial era mostly ended 40 years ago, that is so recently! 40 years ago is the 1980s! And mostly ended. How is the center funded? The center is not endowed and it does not accept funding from every government. It relies entirely on the generosity of individuals. Which individuals, Atlas Network? Who's funding you? Apparently, Atlas Network's known for opposing climate change legislation around the world. Ah, free market. I don't know why I don't just go to the Wikipedia page first. I'm so stupid. Financials. As of 2005, they received $500,000 from ExxonMobil and also received nearly $1 million from tobacco company Philip Morris. Of Atlas Network partners, 57% in the U.S. had received funding from the tobacco industry, received funding from the Koch family foundations. I thought it would be a joke. Yep, of course. That's Mr. ExxonMobil. Yes, the name is a reference to Atlas Shrugged, almost certainly. No, they deny that? Okay, well, they can deny it all they want. The Atlas Network has also been criticized for its links to right-wing movements, including the administration of Donald Trump, Brexit, and anti-government protests in Latin America. Atlas Network affiliates in the UK were some of Brexit's key backers. The 2022 investigation by the Narwhal, Floodlight News, and The Guardian found Atlas Network had lobbied the Canadian government to limit how much Indigenous communities can push back on energy development on their own land, while promoting the view that Indigenous prosperity is virtually impossible without oil and gas. Ah, so now we know why the representative of the Atlas Org's Africa Development Group doesn't believe it's because colonization, because they're pro-colonization. Yeah, this is just another think tank that's disguising like neoliberal free market anti-government reforms as a kind of like, you know, take your own journey, develop your own path, free yourself, entrepreneurship. How can you claim to be in favor of local entrepreneurial development and then go ahead and like try to limit the extent to which the indigenous community can push back on development on their own land? Clearly, individual autonomy and freedom are not priorities here. Holy shit, look what they do. This is insane. Mission Johnny Appleseed of anti-regulation groups. What is this? With a modest $4 million budget in 2003 and a staff of 8, Atlas Economic Research Foundation is on a mission to populate the world with new free market voices. In its 2003 review of activities, quaintly titled its Investor Report, Atlas announced it worked with 70 new think tank entrepreneurs from 37 foreign countries. And so, by the way, guys, when people talk about the deep state, this is the closest thing you're going to get to the actual deep state. The closest thing you're going to get to pure evil on Earth isn't like a fucking elected government official. It's this massive, congealed, infinite, like, disease network of think tanks upon think tanks upon think tanks, who staffed and operated by people whose names you'll never know, funded by money you'll never be able to count, who have the ear of elected officials and dictators all over the world. Yeah, like, yeah, no regulation, no accountability, just this diseased sprawl of business interests around the world. The moss. It's the moss. It's the fucking moss.
So the best way to think about it, Jordan, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier when you use the word
So we can all progress now, in spite of the fact that this is a woman who I know you all automatically are deferential to. We now understand this woman is just one appendage of an evil, like eldritch being that that sprawls around the world. We know that, right?
Dubai just recently entered the top 10 of international financial centers of the world.
Oh, you really don't want to be using Dubai as a positive example of economic development. Oh my god. I didn't think we'd go that bad. Dubai is built on literal slave labor. They literally brought in slaves by the thousands to build Dubai, and it exists as a playground, as an amusement park for the ultra-wealthy to shit into gold toilets. They have poop trucks. They were so... It's not a city for humans to live in. They don't even have a sewer system. Dubai, poop trucks. They don't have a sewer system. All these buildings have tanks underneath and outflow vents. And there's a literal traffic... I'm not joking! It's traffic in Dubai! Honey, why are you late to the child raping festival that us billionaires were putting together? Oh, sorry, I got stuck behind the 3-mile-long poop truck fucking jam. This is real. These are poop trucks.
And what Dubai did at some point is think about it and be like, on this bare, plot of sand that's technically worth nothing right now as is.
It's still worth nothing.
That British common law system. So it's very, very interesting theologically and metaphysically. So it's predicated on the idea that every individual has all the rights that there are, except for those that are specifically regulated and limited by legal necessity. And then generally that realm of necessity has emerged only as a consequence of disputes between people. So you're free to do whatever you want unless you have a dispute with someone else. Then the dispute is adjudicated according essentially to...
What? He's just talking about the way things work. What? I think it's very interesting how people can do stuff, but if other people disagree with them, that's when we have rules to keep everyone from doing stuff others disagree with. Why does he talk like this? Why is he like that? Yeah, obviously. Yes, of course. Yes. We set up systems that are permissive when there are no disagreements, but less permissive when there are. That's how everything works.
constitutional and theological principles, and then a precedent is established. And then the whole body of law built up that body of precedents.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's bottom up.
She's just waiting to like get back to her think tank like spiel that she's like recited to government leaders multiple times. You know, she's like, okay, yeah, all right, thanks for letting me be on your YouTube channel. Shut the fuck up.
Anyway, so from this standpoint here, you have Dubai who's now trying to put all of this together, and eventually they put a set of laws together that would now be conducive to being a top international financial center in the world. And voila, in less than a generation, in less than 25 years, Dubai completely unrecognizable.
So, God, this is so stupid. Oh my God. They wanted to make Dubai a tourist center for the ultra-wealthy, and they did, and obviously to get the ultra-wealthy there, they had to promise the American businessmen that they wouldn't execute them for drinking alcohol or whatever. Like, yeah, okay. None of this, so obviously she's like a think tank ghoul, and she's aligned with the right, and she doesn't give a shit about people who've been colonized or anything. She doesn't give a shit about the poor. It's all about big corporations. Her org's got money from Exxon, from the Koch brothers, you know, whatever. We know that. Okay, fine. But like, again, no real advice exists here, you know? Fuck. She's basically just like the right wing of the IMF. Like, the IMF is really fucking bad, and the neoliberal reforms that it pushes on countries are often like pretty detrimental to its internal development. And she's somehow worse than that. It's like the people who think that the IMF is like too moderate in fucking over these countries. God, imagine citing Dubai as a positive example in the context of wanting to enrich impoverished African nations. What the fuck?